we are here in Breakout Room 2 with Glenn, who we have just met from our earlier session. So in this breakout room, he'll go through with us the discussion on IoT applications for enabling operational effectiveness in the building and property operating landscape. So Glenn, please.
Hey, thanks a lot, Emily. Yeah, so I think, welcome back. I think we have about 25 attendees in this breakout session. What I wanted to do, just to again set some framework around it, is around this whole topic of operational efficiency, operational management, that key theme, and wanted to go again, from the point of view of a value chain. There's obviously the built environment, and there's obviously the management maintenance type of environment, if you will, in this space. So this is likelihood where we'll work around, and then of course things will then slowly evolve as it goes along. Okay. Now first thing I wanted to get it kicked off, Sadvik, you are the first within the panel from before. You're the first one today. Okay, so I'll ask you the first question, and it's around the whole built environment and some of your thoughts around, especially, when people are in the construction space. How has the current situation been, and how have some of these construction companies maneuvered, with technology as an enabler of that solution?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. So construction, there are different types of problems in terms of construction delays is one of the biggest challenge due to the workforce, and how do you bring, it's not specifically to Singapore, but across the world, how do you bring people to work at construction site, because it requires very close proximity of working, very hard to enforce safe distancing sometime. So that is one of the problem statements that are articulated. So there are solutions that in that space where companies are trying out wearables for workers. So there has been connected worker kind of solution for many years, like 2 to 3 years you hear about connected workers. Suddenly that has taken prominence in terms of monitoring vitals of the workers, as well as monitoring their safe distancing, etc. So that's one area I see that a lot of traction that is getting in. And then there is a whole digitalization of construction activity. So building a digital twin of the building right from the beginning of the construction. So that is a new area where you will have a model built for the building, because there are instrumentation done right at the construction stage, be it accelerometers or tilt meters, that are sensors plugged into geotechnical investigations. So these are some of the areas I see as emerging.
Okay, no, thanks a lot for that. And also for Trung, do you want to share your perspective of it from what you know in your space?
Yeah, I think echo Rao opinion just now. I think is in our space we see the similar trend of in building a construction, they have to quickly changing to adapt to the new requirement and to the new I say, like, not just requirement, like the new need for being more effective in managing the worker, because right now with the new requirement, there's common sentiment in the construction market was the productivity of the worker will probably reduce somewhere 20-30%, because so how they're gonna apply technology to offset that decrease in productivity has been a really hot topic. Yeah.
Okay, Theo, because of the fact that you're in Hitachi, I mean, Hitachi has got a lot of automation solutions and things like that. How has that taken off in the construction space, right? Low touch, less human intervention, and more automation. Any thoughts on robotics or things of that nature?
Yeah, look, on the actual construction as such, I think a lot of the industry is waiting for normal to return, right? I don't think they asset tracking and those type of things, I think has been absolutely key. Automation's been key, supply chain's been key. So those are the key things. I don't think to a large extent they are investing significant money from a worker point of view at this stage, apart from tracing and keeping the workers safe, right? But the discussions that we're starting to see pivot on the developer side from a new construction is saying, that with IoT, with these new revenue streams that's now emerging, with integration, you're not making a decision for the next 12 months, for the next 24 months. You are making a decision for the next 3 years to 5 years. I'll give you an example. If you have a vertical building going up now, and let's say it's set within an ecosystem, what is a key decision now, what they have to spend is to integrate the vertical transportation with BMS, access control, and the whole ecosystem. Now, is there a financial benefit to that right now? The answer is not really. Apart from efficiency, people waiting times at a lift. But what will happen next 2-3 years, and COVID's accelerated that, is if you look at these large ecosystems, you have 30,000 people living within a let's say a precinct. You can't have 30,000 delivery people running into a building every day, right? So from a security, it's a huge risk security-wise. From COVID, it's a huge risk. So now suddenly they're saying, how did this ecosystem take care of delivery? So now it becomes a cost center for them. But if they had integrated vertical transportation, they can run bot delivery into the building. Now it becomes a profit center, not a cost center, because they can charge for last mile delivery. So, but that decision, they have to make the buy decision now for something that will generate revenue, let's say in 3 years from now. So that's where that forward planning is coming in, and how we then formulate that business structures to help them do that and get to that net new revenue.
Thanks a lot for that, Theo. And I think as you all can hear, it goes more into the construction industry of the future type discussion as we go along that line. Now, if we move a little bit into the actual property management space, and I know we've talked a lot about some of that earlier. I'm just thinking a bit with regard to the retail property, right? Given the fact that we know, firstly, you don't get enough of people moving into the buildings, and subsequently the retailers suffer, and then subsequently it leads to the property owners and the landlords actually having felt the brunt of it. Any thoughts around that space from an operational effectiveness perspective? I'll give an example, okay? A lot of all our air conditioning systems are now what I call legacy things, and it's such a painful thing to try to change it, right? And I don't know how, given a situation like this, any technology can be used to manage that side of operational effectiveness if you look at it from a cost perspective.
Yeah, so just from Hitashi's point of view, once again, the way we would approach that is once again with a full, let's call it a smart services blueprint, looking at the entire ecosystem, saying, what do you need to, what do you have, what do you need to transform, what can you use that's there, then set a roadmap up. But what we will do is we'll then do that and deliver that as a service over the next 15, 20 years, which means is that capital outlay is not on the front end where this developer is saying, I have to do that when I'm, and bear that cost over a long time, especially if it's brownfield, right? Where they don't have that sale or initial capital injection from the sale of the individual property. So that we will then form the partnership and we'll then co-create with them and deliver that, and not just that, future-proof it and keep it smart, and actually help them generate the revenue. So the partnerships we're forming is not just on the front of the construction side and the OT side, but actually on the operational and FM side as well, to then follow that entire journey through.
All right, thank you. Anyone wants to add, Sadvik, any of your thoughts in this space?
Yeah, just want to share from my experience is, yes, I think that is the problem you really spot on. I think it's with the effect of COVID-19 is, I think it's undeniable that the investment in the commercial building sector will be reduced. We don't see new building coming up, but we do see influx, like an increase in the retrofitting of the old building with our legacy system and how to make it more efficiency and stuff. And that is actually quite a challenge. In terms of IoT application, I think how it could help is it could, first of all, like integrate all the data from your legacy system and provide, I would say, quick, easy to use retrofitting solution. A lot of people have different product, like even a smart meter or Bosch. Recently, we work with them to deploy. If you have an old power meter, for example, that couldn't send data out, you have a small piece of device, can just attach to it, can start sending data to the cloud. So those, I think, is how they can help a old building with legacy system to at least bypass the big infrastructure costs and get a certain amount of data to be more effective and just like we say, stay more resident in during this time and planning for bigger transformation in the next 3-5 years when the market kind of picking up.
Thanks, Trang. Sadvik, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I agree with what Trung has said. Basically, if there are insights that you can quickly generate, as I mentioned in my session as well, reduce the time to value, right? So you use the existing infrastructure and leverage existing data, build new use cases. One of the things we see is the cross-domain use cases, as I mentioned, right? For example, a visitor management system was to work independently in the past. So can you integrate visitor management system along with your CCTV and lift operation system? So can you optimize the lift's operation instead of it as, keep running up and down? So there are challenges about integration, but I think as there are compulsions to reduce cost, optimize operation, these vendors are opening up for integration. So that is a new area that is emerging.
You mentioned this very interesting point, and I remember I had that discussion with a client of mine. And I remember in the past, a lot of the integration relies upon whatever you can extract out from the PLC, the logic controller. Yeah. Now, apparently, nowadays, when you have a sensor, that sensor can immediately bypass all these things because you are anyway sending the data feed in remotely to ultimately the edge device and out it goes, right? So any specific example to bring to life for audience so that they can then start to visualize a use case, because that data integration piece is definitely a big roadblock to a lot of what people want to do. If you could share a little bit of that to say, hey, look, this is how simple it is.
So typically the single source of truth in most of the buildings will be a BMS system. Having said that, all the data points will not be connected to BMS. So there are areas where you can tap. So most likely they will be using some sort of protocols like BACnet, Modbus. So if the BMS is not, you are not able to tap into the BMS system, maybe due to the nature of the openness the vendor provides, or due to it is a very legacy system, you don't want to touch operational system. There are areas where we have implemented in the past tapping data onto directly at a controller level, at a lower level of where the data gets generated, and having a parallel edge capability where get the data, aggregate and send what you need and send that back to a cloud. So it is feasible, but it is a little bit of time consuming and you have to figure it out everything yourself, all driven by what is the ROI you are trying to get out of that use cases.
Okay, thank you. Can we also now speak a bit about that end use of data, whereby as we look at it from a, this is all the data we have. This is what you can predict with the data, and these are just some examples of how data is being used in the space of operational effectiveness. If any of you could bring some of these examples to life, that would give the audience some idea of, this is what you mean. Okay, great. I've heard about energy management, but exactly how we use it and how we anticipate, and almost like a very simple 3 to 4 block process for people to start to visualize in their mind, if I may ask that question.
Okay, yeah, I can give a quick example for that. Is that for building right now, people talk about data analytics and AI is really sexy and stuff, which is, again, I'm not a big fan of AI idea, because at the end of the day, you need a lot of data for it to work and for it to be reliable. But an easy one to achieve is we do in industrial setting and building also is they call early fault detection. So those I think would be easier to achieve and require less data. So really is you can get couple sensor in if you don't have the data yet, but if you have, then you combine with the maintenance record of the facility guys, and then you can come up with a model. I would say pretty early prediction that, let's say, we predict that this month your VFD or your chiller need to be maintained. If not, something would happen based on the data from the past 1 month. Oh, sorry, for about 1 year, from 12 months. So those early fault detection, or could be you predict a HVAC would go down by looking at the trend of the temperature and the pressure inside the part. So those model, I think, is easy to achieve, and that's normally require a lot of the domain expertise or operational expertise from the facility guy who is daily working on it. And that is a good example, and I think it's a low fruit hanging for most of the people to capture before we're talking about big data or AI, and building advisory would give you a prediction as far as a couple years.
Okay. Now, interesting you mentioned that, with the data you can predict. Now, I'm going to add, because every time you talk about the AI or the intelligence piece of the equation, how does that closed loop come to life, in a real scenario? So, for example, right, I think the classic one is the fire protection. That's so basic, but it's been around for more than 20 years, whereby, if the fire is there, the smoke alarm kicks off, the sprinkler goes on, but at the same time, that data feed goes straight to the fire department and it alerts. You don't even need to pick up the phone to call, things like that. How do you bring some specific examples, as you were talking about, all the way through to the end of that solutioning in an automated way? Again, open to the floor. I'm just trying to get the audience, closer to this big monster called IoT and Industrial 4.0.
Yeah, in that example, so like the fire system right now, that in terms of firefighting, that they will send one signal directly to the fire department. They will send a truck down. But before that, there's so many activity. No action you have to take. And surprisingly, like you say, the technology in there for 20 years, but you can see a lot of places now, they still basically a smoke alarm trigger, and then they give a big alarm and everyone start taking action. But in terms of automated, you can actually do a lot of things with that. For example, in our industry, let's say a semiconductor facility, with things like that happen, you can automate the whole sequence before human have to interact. Basically, you send a signal to a life safety system, which first put in an announcement fire on the place, and then at the same time you try to shut down certain process that have a lot of toxic gas, that high opportunity that will explode, and also open link to the CCTV, and then open to basically clear all the pad for the exit door, instead of you have to tap the card, now all the pad and stuff like that. But that certain place in place, but now with IoT, we can give even a more accurate and real-time update of what's going on to the guy in charge. So I think that's the next level of IoT, where we tie all the data together, and together with the alarm that's sent to the guy in charge, he also have the live feed of the CCTV inside the room or in the corridor available on his phone. So instead of he have to spend 5 minutes, going to this screen, look at that, look at that screen, look at that, he can see all that in one screen or in his phone. So with a critical matter like that, I think that is very important. Even though you say 5 minutes, that's 5 minutes to save a lot of lives. So I hope that is one example to show how IoT could bring more value from some technology that's been there in 20 years. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, now I'm just thinking aloud here as I switch and move into the space of, I call it, legislation and government policies and all that. How has that been a help, or how has that been a hindrance in what you're trying to do in this entire space on operational efficiency, especially when certain things needs approval from certain departments because of safety reasons and all that? Any thoughts or sharing, especially if it's a bit more broad, where it might not be a Singapore context, it might be something in the Philippines or in Indonesia, because these things are very real. They become roadblocks at the end of the day.
Yeah, in fact, Glenn, that is one of the questions that the attendees have asked So what can company do when regulations actually create, say, operational inefficiencies, especially in industries such as garment, handicraft, manufacturing? Maybe a bit of time check here. We have 15 minutes to end of session. So
okay, yeah, thanks a lot, Emily. Yeah, have you encountered that specifically, anyone? Sadvik, did you have any experience in that space? Or
Regulation becoming a roadblock was not so much a case. In fact, in countries like Singapore, we are fortunate that regulations helps us to get new solutions. For example, new green mark that BCA has enforced made many new solutions to come into market, such as optimizing your energy operations within chiller plants and HVAC equipment. There are incentives for people to implement such solutions. So certainly there are regulations around devices, communication protocols. So there may be a solution which works in a particular type of protocol, which or a communication channel very well and proven, but that might not be an approved solution in a particular geography or a country or a market. So that kind of regulations do impact. But other than that, I think especially when it comes to building operations, optimizing energy consumptions, regulations across the globe are supportive of that. So I think we need to find our niche area where we want to play in alignment with the regulations.
Look, regulations is always a moving target, but I think the key there is that traditionally it's going to be data, protecting people and data, or then security, right? So if you make sure you cover those two off, you should be good.
Theo, I'm going to pick on you next, because you come from the African continent, of course, South Africa, but because you're closer to the African continent, I think a lot of that infrastructural issues and all that come to be very real for you. Now, as we talk about all these things, right, is there a minimal requirement in terms of what kind of infrastructure is required in a country before a lot of some of these things can come to life?
Look, I think that we should simplify the way we look at, just at the end of the day, it's about people, right? And how we can improve total quality of life. That's what our outcomes should be.
Right.
And then what that means in different regions is different, right? So what total quality of life means in Africa, India, Singapore, Australia is different. So I think that's where we need to get in touch as a company with the people and what that outcome is and how we can do that. So in Africa, a cell phone is a crucial lifeline, and you can really help them improve that. But it's not going to help them with water, as an example, right? Clean water. So there's still the key basics, water, energy, and those things that Hitachi really always wants to focus on and make sure we can deliver that. But then apart from that, it's about the person. And then, in Africa, cell phone will be a key component to that. As an example, telehealth, right, is a way we can then start utilizing that device to drive total quality of life. So, but I think the key is total quality of life. That's what our focus should be. And if we do that, then we'll be successful as companies.
I want to draw upon what you just mentioned with cell phone, because I remember, and I just want to give context to the audience, that was in 2015, 5 years ago. I went to Kenya. And of course, we know, these are all frontier markets, but it's so interesting to see, cashless payment taking place, not even with a smartphone.
Absolutely.
With a normal feature phone, Nokia, the one you press the buttons and that's it. And I think the system was called M-Pesa or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. But literally, they were paying each other using that thing.
Yep.
Of course, there's a kiosk and things like that. But it's so amazing to see how, given the lack of a lot of infrastructure, a lot of these innovations starts to kick in a lot of these countries that probably even in our world, and I use Singapore, given I'm Singaporean, so I can say that we are actually very oblivious to, and we're still very a cash-based society.
Sure. No, absolutely. But the thing as well, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So if you look at these developing countries, they don't have physical infrastructure, let's say line infrastructure. So the cell phone became that enabler, but that then spawned a range of technologies around that. So that's the key, just being in touch with people and outcomes and improving the quality of life.
No, thanks a lot for that, Theo. Anybody else want to chime in at this juncture, or should I take a question?
I actually wanted to chime in a little bit. Is that I echo you with this amazing of how we saw that we do projects in all over the world, but the emerging market is the one who are a lot more, surprisingly, who are a lot more acceptable to new technology. Like you say, like, amazing in a place like Africa, and people is more advanced than here in Singapore. And that is the sentiment I share, because I don't know what's the reason. I'm still trying to think about it, but it does. I do see that they're a lot more risk, like high risk taker, and then they're willing to, like the adoption rate in those emerging markets was amazingly faster than developed country. Yeah.
True.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Savik, I just have to pick on you now, okay? Now, I want to use this word called jugaad. And if you come from India, you know what is jugaad. Could you share a little bit about this, since we're all talking about this innovation and all that, because it applies from a principle standpoint and the fact around people's mindset and all that. Could you share a bit about that? Of course, in the context of this whole entire, technology. I mean, India, like we all know, highly democratic country, a lot of negotiation, discussion up there. But you know what? The business community is clocking away. Clock, right? And we know that that place is obviously a very strong adopter of technology. Could you speak a bit about that?
You want to speak about jugaad, or you want to speak about the business?
Okay, so I'm going to connect the both together, because it talks about, I'm going to draw on what each of the panelists have talked about, the necessity, right, is the mother of invention, for example.
Yes, exactly.
Developing markets, frontier markets, they don't have anything, but the take-up rate is very high. So there's this whole mindset and feel. And then for some reason, when I look at India, I always think of jugaad, because they got nothing, but they got a lot of very interesting things, right? And so if you could share a little bit and bring that to life.
Yeah. I would, in my session, I talked about time to value. So for me, jugaad is time to value. Jugaad is something you look at the value what you derive and make it happen quickly. And if you relate that to whole agile and innovation people talk about today, it is all about it. You don't wait for a waterfallish thing where to happen for 2 years down the line. You have a problem, you need to solve that today and come up with a solution that is agile, and you solve partially or you solve full, but come up with a solution quickly. So that is how I articulate jugaad as a term. For people who are not aware, jugaad is something is a quick and dirty way of doing things, but it works. So I think current situation, right? So previously when we engaged our clients, so it is always about, okay, next month can you do a POC for 3 months? And then, okay, then the POC, can you do a pilot for 6 months? Then I will see whether I have to buy this or not. So this has been the trend. And there are many companies who went into the trap of POC and pilots, right? Many startups that have died in this phase of POC and pilots doing to their clients. So whole beauty of this whole change that is happening in the market is it has compressed the whole timeline. So for example, nobody was talking about temperature scanning or a touchless kiosk for last 2 years. If imagine you want to sell that to a shopping mall, a temperature scanning, or maybe a touchless or a low touch kiosk where you don't even need to touch any screen, right? So it has been a hard sell. So, but this new situation has made it so fast. There is no discussion about POC or pilot. So is it working? Is it working elsewhere? Bring it. So that is the level of discussion that is happening. So that is the positive side of thing that I see for as a solution providers. It has compressed the sales cycle, and you really see whether it generates value or not within a matter of weeks to months. Previously, it was years in the cycle of POCs and pilots. That's how I articulate the plan.
Okay, now thank you for that. I want to, as we talk about this, and again in the developing environment, right, there's a question from Argan. He says there are challenges in the connectivity, reliability versus connection cost, right? Like using open frequency LoRa versus paid connection, via the telco. And the question is how does one get around the connection issues? And I think probably the question is around, are you doing that exercise in a local or more geographically spread out context? Any thoughts on that question?
So based on my experience, actually, I love those low bandwidth technology. Actually, I normally see it as a get around for a lot of challenges. So I don't know if in this particular context, you want to get more data over this this communication prototype, or what really the context is.
Yeah, and the region that we're talking about from a connectivity point of view. Yeah, and look, once again, there's a lot of, with technology, there's a lot of solutions coming down the line. Let's say at least in the developed world, where we are starting to see more and more solutions coming out, that will give you overall connectivity around a precinct ecosystem, where that's 5G as a service turnkey, where that's Wi-Fi 6 turnkey as a service, and so forth. So once again, I think that the cost will come down. Overall pervasive connectivity will drive that. And the key is it's in big industries' interest to ensure connectivity, right? So some other people will solve that. The question is whether we have enough roadmap to wait till get there, whether we need another solution before that. But yeah, depending where you're talking about.
Okay. No. All right, I'm going to switch a bit into an industry-specific question, and that comes from John. And I think he's in the context of a logistics industry, and he mentions, while managing a fulfillment center, human factor in pick and packing play a significant role, and most fulfillment companies can't afford to automate. Are there modular or cost-effective solutions, or an AAS type of a solution, is his question. Right, in the context of operational efficiency in a logistics operation.
I specifically have not seen, or that's not my, I wouldn't know.
Sure. Trung, I'm thinking whether did you have any chance to work in that kind of a setting, or some ideas for people to walk away with?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I doesn't have experience on this to replace human in pick and packing. I know a couple of places they use robot to do that, but I wouldn't call it a very cost-effective solution. More so it's just okay of technology.
Right. Maybe
Hitachi will have solutions if it's, let's say it's a value chain, or it's a reoccurring event that's happening. We can then monitor human behavior and just see if they then alter from that behavior, it will signal a warning sign, right? But traditionally with pick and pack, it is a pretty wide spectrum of that you have to cover for. So I know in a lot of industries, everything gets scanned, right? Barcode scan. So that's the only way to overcome the human and that mistake around process, but it does slow it down. So, whether you then implement technology, a barcode bin, which then basically as it goes in, it's scanning it. So it's not an additional action. So there's things you can do to do that, but it's going to be, you need to spend money.
Right. No, thanks a lot. And I just wanted to also, maybe now I'm jumping between the facilitator and what I've seen in my past life. So one of the few things that the pick and place logistics type related operations has for picking parcels and things like that. So I'm going to put in context of a very simple, let's call it, you're doing the Amazon business, and you've got people ordering things, and the parcels are a couple of things. One, a different shape, size, right? That's one. Another one, obviously the weight, right? And so a lot of them actually have got vision systems that are obviously put in multiple locations. Obviously, you want to cover your plan view, your front view, your back view, and all that. And that, once snapped out, would then immediately program and say, you know what, this is of a certain size, therefore this is the pick and placer will pick it up. Some of them, while you roll along the line, will have a certain weight catch, and obviously you capture that data, and then they will say, okay, therefore the strength of that arm needs to be of a certain size. But the point is that a lot of these things, depending on what it is, can mean an entire infrastructure, like what Theo mentioned. It may not necessarily be that cost effective, but the solutions are out there, right? And then, of course, then the question then becomes whether, that service provider and the end user of that thing wants to come up with some way of I call it a mixed model. Nowadays, there are a lot of profit sharing models, low upfront, subscription based. You know what, you don't own this thing, you just rent it from me, I'll come and change it from you, which is nothing very different from what you would see in a rental car company, right? Don't worry about it. So I'm just trying to just add some perspective to your question, John.
But it comes back to the earlier session we had at training, right? In a simple world, what we found, if you can't replace or you struggle from technology and people, it's how you incent people then to not make a mistake, right? So whether you then run an incentive program or for the guy, for around, the number of mistakes or the number of issues you're experiencing, that then has significant impact on your business. So it just depends.
Yeah. Right. No, thank you. Okay, now I just want to entertain one more questions, and then I wanted to give each of the panelists a parting shot for all of you. If there's one thing that they want you to walk away with, I'll leave that to the end. So I'll do one more question, and that's from Adam. And he talks about the outsourcing model, right? And the skepticism around IoT's impact and ability on interoperability is the big issue, right? And so therefore, his question then is, are you able to give examples on how companies are able to develop its capability to build multiple use operational cases? Is his question, right? So I just repeat, it's quite a loaded question.
It depends again what industry you're talking about. If we're talking, let's say, about an urban environment, right, what is becoming very, very clear there is that you firstly need your IT/OT integration, right? So your physical assets that are operational, where you are touching the consumer or the ecosystem where the consumer is moving through. So that's your touch point that needs to be integrated across that entire value chain, right? Including outside the buildings, which is what we call the precinct ecosystem. So the earlier you can touch that person coming in, the better you can serve that person through the process. Then you have to integrate that with your your OM and FM services. And then if you can really integrate those two, that's when you really have a seamless operation. So, and then depending on the outcome, so there's a range of different things on the OM and FM side, all the way from footfall traffic, all the way to, a temperature scanning within a room that you can do. So there's a lot of stuff that, once again, will drive that outcome. So, but you have to integrate both those. Once you do that, you go beyond just the efficiency and effectiveness. You then go into net new revenues, areas where you can start generating new revenue.
Thank you for that. Okay, Trong, you wanted to add on to it?
Yeah, I want to add on again. This is really interesting question, and I wish we can discuss more. Adam, with your question, I agree with Theo. Is different context would give different business case. So I'd like to add, just from my perspective, let's say you're looking at a global supply chain that pursuing outsourcing model. I mean, this is an MNC pursuing that. In that context, I think IoT does have a lot of good business case on how they provide the transparency to the next level of, let's say I place an order for my car. Let's say Tesla, for example, I place an order for Tesla car, and all I know is I have to wait for 6 months. But if they have an IoT integration to their supplier, I know exactly at this moment, my car body is finished in China, my wheel is finishing in Brazil, and that gives a lot of enhancement in terms of the user experience, but also in terms of the company, give them a lot more information and increase the productivity by a lot by reallocate resource accordingly. And those, I think that would be really is the big impact of the IoT technology nowadays. Another example I could think of is recently, I don't know if people from Singapore would see your electricity bill shoot over the roof, right? Because I'm including one case, I have over $1,000 utility bill, and the explanation from BUB was say, okay, we couldn't send anyone to your house to take the reading, so we just projected it. But with IoT, you totally can fix that problem. Yeah, so they do help the tenant with you can go read your own reading and key it in. But one of the solutions we actually deploy in Malaysia is helping this industrial park to automate their billing system, where they have two guys, working around. They have 300 plus tenants, and they would have two guys almost every day have to go to each place to record, because that means 1 month they can cover the whole 300 plus tenants, because they within a quite distance away from each other. So we really just develop an apps that first step is to develop an app, so the guy can just go there, capture the reading, and then will it will ultimately capture the reading to avoid error. But the next step that we in the middle of deploying right now is to put an IoT gateway next to each meter. And those data would just capture using LoRa network to send data back every week. So they don't have to go and take the reading. So that helped, I think, both the company and the tenant in terms of the experience and in terms of increase the productivity. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Trung.
Yeah, that's just the two contexts I can think of. Yeah.
Brilliant. I thought it was good to let that audience hear that. Now, I'm going to leave each of you with the opportunity to kind of like let these people walk away with one key thing. So, Savi, I'll start with you first. What do you want the audience to walk away with today?
Yeah, I think when you think about building solutions, especially for the solution providers, think of solving multiple problems if possible, not just one particular problem. And think of ecosystem. As I mentioned, if people remember my diagram where I showed multiple domains and glue at the center, which is a platform. So think of that construct. Think of 2 to 3 domains. How can you correlate different data from different domains and generate new insights that can help achieve last mile of efficiency in the operations. So very specific to facility operations. So that is my takeaway for the team, or the other people here. Thanks, Glenn. I can't hear you, Glenn. I think we lost you.
All right. No, thanks a lot, Savik. And Theo, for yourself, apart from leaving them with beer and braai.
It sounds good. I think the key, I'll stay high level with this, and I think that it's very important with COVID to keep a larger perspective, not just to get too short-term focused. But the key priorities, I think, is that we are moving more and more into a consumer-centric economy, right? So if you run an IoT business, if you can provide an outcome that will improve, as we said, that total quality of life, you have a business. The second thing is creativity around business models. You will have to get more creative around how you engage the client and how eventually you touch the end client. And then lastly, I think building trust. You have to build that trust, short-term COVID and then long-term partnership-wise. And then obviously technology enables all that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Trung, you wrap us up.
Thanks. I think in the context of today's discussion, I really think that the pandemic does bring a lot of challenge, but does bring a lot of opportunity as well. And don't get caught up of the ROI. I think we can, for IoT solution, you can always start very small. Be really creative on the data you had in hand. And I say be brave, embrace the technology rather than scared of it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. I think this ends our session. Emily, I hand this back to you. We hope, the audience, you walk away with something where hopefully it alleviates your concerns that this is not a big monster, number one. Number two, that it goes beyond the technology. You hear a lot about quality of life. You hear a lot about making sure you have the people at the center, and also that the actual cost it's not the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. There are solutions that are in the few thousand and probably in the weeks in terms of implementation. So I hope that will get you on the right track together with the use cases that were shared by the panelists. So thank you very much to each and every panelist and also for the audience for your time.
Thank you so much, Glenn. So we are getting close to time, so I'm afraid that we have to wrap up the session. So thank you everyone again for joining us and participating today. So for our audience, you have some question that you may be too shy to ask, but don't worry about that. You still have the chance to ask by joining us on the Interchange community platform, where you can post comments, you can interact with the fellow participants and also participate in the discussion. Information on joining Interchange is shown in the chat room and in an email that you will receive after the session. So please also take a moment to provide feedback on this session and do let us know if you have any ideas for further future topics. I would love to hear from you. A link of today's entire webinar will be posted on our website as well. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at Interchange and having you joining us in future episodes. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.